Crackdown 3 developer Sumo Digital has opened a new studio in Leamington Sp that will focus on the creation of mobile games. The new opening will be led by former CODAMASTERS and SEEK Chief Technical Officer Chris Southo. Prior to joining Sumo, Southo spent close to 15 years at SEEK and founded and built the company's dedicated European mobile studio, SEEK Hardlight. The Leamington office will become the 7th studio in Sumo's umbrella, following the recent acquisitions of the REST developer the Chinese rumored work-for-hire outfit Red Kite. Bethesda Softworks has resolved a lawsuit it brought against Behavior Interactive and Warner Brothers last June for copyright infringement, breach of contract and unfair competition. Bethesda released a statement earlier today, claiming it had reached an agreement with Behavior, although no further information was given. Bethesda Softworks and Behavior Interactive jointly announced today that the parties have amicably resolved the lawsuit Bethesda brought against Behavior and others related to Fallout Shelter and Westworld mobile games. The statement reads, "This comes after Bethesda accused Warner Brothers and Behavior back in June 2018 for copyright infringement, misappropriation of trade secrets, deceptive business practices, and unfair competition with the release of a Westworld mobile game." Bethesda took legal action after pointing out similarities to Fallout Shelter, accusing the former of copying the same or highly similar game design, art style, animations, features, and other gameplay elements as Fallout Shelter. Warner Brothers and Behavior followed up with a statement shortly after the complaint was filed, saying that the accusations made against them were baseless. Gamasutra has reached out to Bethesda for any additional comments, and this piece will be updated should one be received. The original post on the Frictional Games blog, https://frictionalgames blogspot.com 2019 divided by 01 Thoughts on Detroit Become Human. HTML. Intro. It has been a while since my last design blog, and I felt it was finally time to write one again. And since I just played through Detroit Become Human, that's what I've decided to write about. First off, let me say that I quite liked the game. I had issues with how they tackled some of the themes, especially in regards to robots, and felt they could have taken some aspects of the world they created more seriously. What made up for the so-so narrative bits were the production value, such as some very cool environments, and the myriad of exciting scenarios. It's not an easy feat to create scenes that are not just narratively compelling, but also engaging play-wise, especially not in the sort of story that Detroit tells. On top of this, the branching and the choice possibilities in Detroit are insane. It is a lengthy game, taking well over 10 hours to complete, and yet as the story unfolds, there is a constant stream of differences that all depend on your previous choices. Everything to how crime scenes change to how characters make remarks, depending on how you played some previous scene, is amazingly well done. The scenes are constantly constructed from a wide array of options, but everything flows together into a coherent whole. Other branching games, such as Hidden Agenda, have a much more jarring presentation, where they inserted lines and cuts in the flow are obvious. In Detroit, flow flaws are basically non-existent, so it is fair to say that production-wise Detroit is quite an achievement. However, the game starts to stumble as it tries to be just that, a game. Just like with previous titles from Quantic Dream, Detroit tries to be what is essentially a playable movie. Mixing film and games gives rise to all sorts of interesting design decisions and issues that are hard to see in other games. It is clear that Quantic Dream are aware of the flaws they have had in their previous games, and there are a bunch of new features that try to address these issues. But with no features come no issues, and lots of juicy design lessons. In this blog post, I will talk at length about affordance, then touch upon branching and themes. Affordance. The first topic of this blog is how Detroit Become Human handles affordance. The game takes place in one of the most challenging environments there. It's design-wise inhabited real-life spaces. Spaces that contain a bunch of everyday items, such as drawers, pictures, tools, televisions, coffee cups, keyboards, clothes and so on and so forth. These are all objects we are not just accustomed to interact with. We also have expectations of their usage. As a player, you need to be able to figure out what objects you can interact with, and in doing so you are constantly battling your ingrained notion of how these objects ought to work. In Heavy Rain, 2010, Quantic Dream's earlier game, the only way to figure what you can and cannot interact with is to carefully check your surroundings and see if an interaction icon pops up. There are some objects that signal pretty clearly that you can interact with them, such as a corpse at a crime scene that you are able to examine. A design goal for a game should be to be able to use your intuition to figure out what sort of items you are to be able to interact with, but the Heavy Rain never lets you train that intuition. Obvious objects are more an exception than a rule, and thus the player's optimal strategy ends up being doing a brute force search of the room to try and locate all the hotspots. So why is this bad? There are too many issues with not being to identify points interaction. The first one is that it lessens the game's sense of immersion. The second is that it does not allow you to properly play the game. Detroit has some tricks up its sleeve to reduce both of these. But before we get into that, it is worth to discuss just what is so problematic with these issues. Immersion. Let us first go over the issue of immersion. In order for a player to feel immersed in an environment, they need to internalize the surroundings. This is something I have covered in other posts. But basically it means that players need to actively take part in the fantasy, and in order for a player to feel present inside a virtual world, they need to have what is called internal representation. While it may not seem like it, real life also operates on internal representation. You do not simply see a chair. The act of seeing a chair triggers all sorts of data about chairs. What their physical properties are, what you can do with them, what are your available actions, and so forth. All of this combine into the actual sensation that there is a chair in front of you. Here comes the issue. If you play a game where looking at a chair lacks any situational data, the player's mental representation is empty. They fail to build any vivid fantasy for the virtual scene that the game tries to build. In turn, the player is unable to place themselves, as in their actual selves, inside the game world. When games fail to take this into account, it results in a world that does not feel very immersive. Play. Secondly, the gameplay issue with the affordances is that the player lacks the ability to plan. I have gone over player planning and why it is so important for good gameplay in a previous post. But let's do a quick recap. We do not play games by just reacting to stimuli that the games send our way. Instead, most of the gameplay takes place inside our heads. We survey our environments, go over long and short-term goals, and decide what set of actions are the most optimal to reach set goals. The longer and more accurate plans a game allows the player to make, the better it will feel to play. As a clear example, let's compare a moment playing Dragon's Lair 1983 to a moment in Civilization 1991. Civilization is filled with possibilities and room for planning. Dragon's Lair, on the other hand, is just a linear path, where you can only get good by memorizing a specific sequence.